So today we're going to take a look at double knitting. So we'll talk a bit about what it is and then we'll get into how to do it. So double knitting is a technique where you create a reversible two-sided fabric that is usually in stockinette stitch, and it gives you the little V's of the stockinette on both sides of the fabric rather than having a bumpy purl side on the wrong side. So we're actually creating two layers of fabric at the same time. It's usually done in two colors, and both yarns are worked on each row. So on each row, you alternate knitting the stitches that are going to appear on this side of the fabric and then purling the ones on this side. And then when you work a row on this side, you'll be knitting the stitches that appear on this side of the fabric and purling the ones that appear on this side of the fabric. So we'll get into how to make that work. One of the magical things about double knitting is that you can swap which color is being used for the front stitches and which ones are for the back stitches at any point, so you can make a pattern that appears. So here we have the white as the main color on this side, but in these rows, we've swapped some stitches, so the orange is showing on this side. And then if you look at the reverse of the fabric, you have exactly the inverse of that. So you can create lots of fun colorwork patterns, and there's actually no floats in this type of colorwork knitting because the yarns are being used one on each side of the fabric, so they're always used throughout the pattern. There's no gap where they get floated along the back. Another thing to consider with double knitting is that because it's really two layers of fabric stuck together, the edges have to be treated a little bit differently than in a normal knitting project. So for this tutorial, we're going to do a very simple edging where we cast on with both colors at the same time. We do a little bit of an edging here that attaches them together, and then we cast off with both colors at the same time. So I'll show you how to do that, but I just wanted to show it as an example as well. There are other methods. So this is a scarf that you can see that it's got a nice tidy edge here with the colors are separated rather than them being mixed together in this edge. And then again here on the edge, they're separated rather than being held together. So that's a slightly different technique. But you can see here as well that we have, for example, this section, the green on this side with the dark purple as the contrast color. And then on this side for the stripe, you have exactly the opposite, purple and green. And then it goes up, so white with green, green with white. So that shows you how the colors are swapped in between where you create the pattern in double knitting. So you're always working with two colors and alternating them on the sides of the fabric. To start our double knitting project, we need to cast on. And as I mentioned, we're doing a fairly simple method here where we're just going to actually cast on with both colors at once. So we're making a slip knot with the two yarns held together. And then I'm going to just do a standard long tail cast on. I use the thumb method. You might have another method for holding the yarn for your cast on. And that's going to create the stitches on my needle. And we're counting each of these as two separate stitches. So we'll knit each strand separately when we get into doing our first row of double knitting. So if your pattern, you need, for example, if you need 40 stitches for your pattern, that will be 20 for the front, 20 for the back, and you'll need to cast on 20 of these double stitches. So just again, showing the long tail cast on here. And you might not get the colors in the same order with every stitch that you cast on, and that is okay. So I'll show you in a second how we're going to deal with that if for some reason you get them twisted up and you get, oh, I didn't twist them there, I meant to twist them and I didn't. But if the stitches were cast on in the opposite order of the color, it doesn't matter at this point. I'll show you how to deal with that in 1 second. So I have my stitches cast on my needle. So all of these double stitches that are cast on together with the two yarns. And the first stitch is our edging stitch. And like I said, we're going to do a pretty simple edging, and all it is knitting the first two together with the two strands of yarn together. So we're going to knit into these two, pull both strands of yarn through. That's our right side edging. Then we get into the double knitting part. So the first stitch is going to be a knit stitch in orange. So we have the first orange stitch. We're going to go into that, and we want both yarns to be held at the back of the work. So both the yellow, or not yellow, white and orange yarns at the back of the work, but we're only going to use the orange to knit the stitch. So we're going to knit that stitch, pull it through. Then we need to purl this white stitch because it's going to be for the reverse, the opposite side of the fabric. But we want to bring both yarns between the needles to the front of the work before we work that purl stitch. So now that they're in front, we go into the stitch, purl it with the white yarn, and off the needle. Both yarns are still in front. Now we're going onto the next stitch. Exactly the same thing. We're going to bring the yarns to the back for the knit stitch, into the orange, knit it with just the orange, and then both yarns to the front, into the white stitch to purl it, purl with just the white, and there we go. Now I said I would tell you what to do if your stitches are backwards on the needle, because right now we're about to knit an orange stitch, but we have the white stitch showing up first from our cast on. All we're going to do is flip it around. So we're going to just slip it knitwise and then flip it back, and now the orange one is in front. So we can move our yarn to the back, both strands, knit into the orange stitch with just the orange, both yarns to the front, purl into the white stitch with just the white. So that is the basics of double knitting. Oh, here I'm going to switch this stitch around again. We go knit with both yarns in back, and then purl with both yarns in front. And we'll do that all the way across the row. So I worked my whole row of double knitting across here with the orange knits on the right side that's facing me, and then you can see that I'm starting to get the white on the reverse side. Here I'm going to do this last 2 stitches here. So I have my yarn in front. I'm going to knit into the orange with both yarns in back, bring them in front to purl the white with both yarns in front. And then to end the row is very easy. We just keep both yarns in front and slip that last stitch. So that's going to make our edging on this side. We're going to turn the work, and then we'll do the same that we did for the right side edging on the beginning. We're going to do here. So we're going to knit these 2 stitches together with both yarns held together. And that's going to start making our edging on this side. Now you can see here that on this side, I have all of the white stitches facing me, and I have the orange stitches at the back. So we're going to work this row exactly the same, except that we're knitting all of the white stitches with just the white with both yarns held in back. So I'm going to start with the knit here, bring the yarn to the front, both of them, and then purl the orange. And we can work across the whole row like that. I've been holding this yarn pretty loosely just to show you the technique. And I want to just mention for a minute that there's a few things that you can do to make it a little bit more efficient as you knit, depending on what your preferred knitting style is. So if you like holding the yarns in your right hand, you can try tensioning them both around your finger, bringing them to the back, picking up just the white, bringing them to the front, picking up this is a little more tricky, picking up just the orange for the purl. So that's one option. If you prefer to hold your yarn in your left hand, you can also try holding them both on the same finger. So I've got them both in the back here. I'm knitting just the white, so I'll pick up just the white here, bring them to the front between the needles, and then this is again, the purls are a little trickier, but bringing the orange around with both yarns in the front there, and then switching back here. If you like this style of knitting with both of the yarns on the same finger, some people find you can get little colorwork ring little trinkets that have a slot to tension each yarn. So you'd wear the ring and it would keep the yarn separate on your finger, and that might help to make the purling a little bit easier. One other option, and this is the one that I tend to prefer, is to actually hold one yarn in each hand. So because I find knitting easier with my left hand, I'm going to keep the color that I'm knitting with in my left hand and the color that I'm purling with in my right hand. And then we're going to just knit like this, bring them both to the front. They always have to both be in the front for the purl. Purl with this hand, bring them both to the back, knit with this hand. So you're using a separate finger to tension each yarn. And you can work up a little bit of speed more, at least I can work up a little bit of speed more easily with this method, but it's very personal and you'll find the one that works for you. So once we've got a few rows of plain double knitting under our belt and we're getting comfortable with the rhythm, we can start alternating the colors to create a pattern. So we're going to start just by doing these boxes here. I'll show you how to do that. I'm doing a narrower version just for the expediency of the video. But we'll start just like before. So we're going to knit these 2 stitches together with both yarns. So that's our edging stitch. And then we're going to knit 6 pairs of stitches in the same pattern that we already have set up. So it's going to be this chunk here. That's with the orange in the front and the white in the back. So both in the back to knit, both in front to purl. That's 2 pairs, 3, 4, 5, and 6. So right now, the way we've done it before to this point where we're just doing plain stitches, these stitches are all alternating in the same pattern all along. Right now, we're going to switch up that pattern. And now instead of knitting the next stitch in the orange to continue the pattern that we have, we're simply going to keep holding both yarns in back like we have been doing and knit that stitch in white instead. And then we're going to bring both yarns to the front. And the next one, we're going to purl with the orange. So now we've reversed the pattern. Instead of knit orange, purl white, we have knit white, purl orange, and we have 2 whites in a row. We're going to continue with this new pattern for 6 stitches to make our white box here. So again, both yarns in the back for the knit stitch, both yarns in front for the purl stitch, and we've switched to knitting with the white and purling with the orange. I have 2, 4, 6, 8. I need 12 stitches. So this will be 10. Oh, and you can see this is a good example of I've made a mistake here because I didn't actually get both of the strands of yarn into the front for that purl stitch. So if I went ahead and knit here, I would be crossing across that stitch on the back. I'd have a little loop that I don't want there. So if you notice that happens, you just need to pick out the last couple of stitches. So take out 1 knit and got 1 purl here to take out. And then now I've got both my yarns together again. And I need to make sure that I bring both to the front for this purl stitch, which is going to be an orange stitch. So both to the back for the knit. Both for the front. Okay, that should be my 6 pairs of stitches starting with the white knit. So I see where I have my 2 stitches together. I'm going to count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. That's my 6 pairs. And then I'm going to go back to knitting the front stitch with the orange and purling the back stitch with the white. So again, both yarns in back, knit the orange, both yarns in front, purl with white. And now you see you have 2 orange stitches in a row. And you've reversed the order again so that you're working again with the orange as the front color and the white as the back color. So I've completed my row here. I was knitting with the orange in front and I've swapped those middle stitches. So it's hard to see the pattern right now. You can see that you're no longer having the exact alternating all the way across. We have some little blips where we have 2 stitches of the same color in a row. But the pattern is going to become much more apparent after we work the next row. So this one, because we've already got it set up, we can basically just follow the colors of the row before. So anyone that's orange, we work in orange. Anyone that's white, we work in white. And we just always keep both yarns in the back for the knit and both yarns in front for the purl. So we're going along here, and here we get to where we've got 2 orange in a row. So we purl this one as usual, then we bring both yarns to the back and then knit. And then you can see you're starting to show up the row that we worked before is going to show up a little bit more here. Now, because I don't want to swap which yarn is in which hand, now I'm going to be knitting with my right hand and purling with my left hand. If there's a big chunk and you really prefer keeping one hand for knitting and one for purling, you can always swap which yarn is held in which hand. But we're just going to go across here, knitting the orange, purling the white. So here you can see that I've got to almost where I have the 2 white stitches in a row again. So again, knitting this next orange, purling the white to maintain that pattern, and then we're swapping both yarns in back and starting to knit with the white and purl with the orange again. Oops. And again, we can just keep following the colors that are already established here because we know this row is the same as the row that's before it. When we get to the end, I'm going to do this last pair here. And like we did before, we're just going to leave both yarns to the front of the work and slip those last 2 stitches, that paired stitch at the edge, that's our edging stitch, and turn our work. And now you can start to see the pattern in the work. So you can see that we've got our 6 white stitches on this side and our 6 orange stitches on that side. And there might be a little bit of a tension wobbliness, especially when you're starting to play with this, where you're switching colors because the stitches are kind of being stretched out a little bit by having those extra room that it has to pull the yarn in between them. As you get going, you'll find your good tension and not have too much of a problem with the stitches being distorted at the edge of the pattern. So once we know how to create patterns by reversing which color we're knitting with and which color we're purling with, we can start to create more complex patterns and shapes like this checkerboard here or the diagonal pattern at the top. In order to understand the directions for how we're going to do that, there's two options. Usually it would be to either read a chart or to look at written directions. I'm going to show the chart first, and then I'll talk about how this is usually notated in written directions. So when you see a chart for double knitting, you're seeing one side of the fabric. So you'll see actually half the number of stitches that you have on your needles. So if we have on our needles here, we have both sides of the fabric on the needles, but this will be twice the number of stitches as we see in this chart because we're only showing in the chart the front side. So each square of the chart is actually representing 2 stitches, and you see the color of the chart that's worked on the front side of the work. So on the right side, if you see a dark color here, you would be knitting 1 stitch with orange and purling 1 stitch with white, and that is equal to 1 square of the chart. If you see the white square, then you're going to be knitting 1 stitch with white, purling 1 stitch with the orange, and that's 1 white square. So, and then when you're going back on the wrong side of the fabric, you have to reverse that in your mind. So when you see a dark square here on, say, row 8, we're working row 8 right here, these stitches are actually going to be white on the side that's facing you, and these ones will be dark because we're working the inverse of this on the wrong side of the fabric. So if you prefer not to work from charts, there is also the option of using written directions. So the pattern that is going to be provided for this skill builder box, there will be written directions as well as a chart. And the chart will be notated with a kind of the pattern will be written with a specific kind of notation. So I just wanted to go over that here. So in this pattern, we're calling the orange color A and the white color B. And each row will tell you how many times to knit with A or purl with B, but we're shortening that to AB and BA pairs. So I'm going to knit this as row 7. So we have our first stitch is just the knit 2 together for our edging stitch, just like we've been doing. And then we have AB times 6. So that is 6 AB pairs. And an AB pair just means to knit A and then purl B. So that is going to be our 6 pairs that go up to the edge of our square. Now it's switching and it's saying BA times 6. So that is our 6 BA pairs where we're knitting with B and purling with A. So 6 of those pairs, 12 stitches. And then we switch back to AB times 6, and that's going to be our last set of 6 pairs where we have the orange is the A, and that's a knit stitch, purl is the B, and that's the white. So when you are working the wrong side of the pattern, if we go over to here and we are pretending we're working from this side of the pattern, now on this side, it's going to say BA times 6 because the white is our B, and always the first stitch in the pair is going to be the knit stitch. So that's B, white, purl, A, orange, B, white, knit, orange, A, purl. Once you get the hang of it, you can make the connection in your mind that what color is B, which color is A, and it's knowing always the knit stitch is the first of the pair and the purl stitch is the second of the pair. So I'm just going to show how we would work one of the slightly more complex patterns here, the checkerboard pattern from the chart. So I've knit up to row 16 here. I'm going to start with row 17 on the chart. And I did not put the selvage stitches, the 2 edging stitches, on the chart. So we're just going to work those as normal, the knit 2 together with both yarns. And then on the chart here, we see that the first 3 stitches, we see that those are white on the side that is facing us. So that means we're going to knit those first pairs of stitches with the white and purl those first 3 pairs of stitches with the orange. So knitting with the white, both yarns and back, purling with the orange, both yarns in front. So we can hold our yarn a little bit better, make this more efficient. There we go. Knit, purl, knit, purl. So we have those first 3 pairs, white, orange, white, orange, white, orange. Now the next 3 on the chart, we see that the dark color, the orange, is what we see on the front of the chart, the front of our work. So that means that the back stitches are going to be purled in the light color, the white. So now we're going to switch. So we're knitting with the orange, purling with the white. 1, 2, 2 pairs. This is pair 3. And we've done that section of the chart. Now we move on to the next section. We've got the 3 white stitches facing us. So again, we're going to swap, knitting with white, purling with orange. And we just follow that all the way along. The tricky part is, of course, when you are working the wrong side row, you're working the inverse. So you have to reverse in your image, make a reverse image in your mind that you're working the light side to face you here and the dark side facing away from you. However, that can be a little bit easier when you have a chart like this, where the pattern only actually ever changes on the right side row. So you can see that on rows 17 and 18 are the same, 19 and 20 are the same. It changes on 21, 25, 29, and then here it's actually changing every 2 rows, but it's still always changing on the right side row. And that means that you can set up the row on the right side where the chart is a little bit easier to follow because the colors are going to be facing you. And then on the wrong side row, you just follow the color of the stitches and make sure that every stitch you work is the same color as the one below it. The last thing I just want to talk about here is the edgings and binding off. So when we do double knitting, we're actually creating 2 separate layers of fabric. So you can see here, we just pulled this off the needle after this row here, where we've alternated the little white box here. And you can see that there's 2 layers of stockinette fabric and there's a space in between. So because we've done this row here where we're alternating which color is for the front and which color is the back, that actually binds the 2 sides of the fabric together. So it joins the fabric together anytime you switch which color is used for the front and which is for the back. So here and here, it attaches the fabric together. But in between, you just have these kind of empty pockets. So if we want the fabric to be one piece, we have to have it joined at the edges. So we started with our cast on with the 2 colors, so that makes the join at the bottom. We've been doing our selvage edges. So these are the 2 stitches we've been knitting together with the 2 yarns held together and then slipping at the opposite end, and that makes a nice chain with both colors at the side. And then we need to bind off both edges together at the top to join the top together. So I'm going to show you how to do that. This nice piece here that's still on the needles. And we're going to do a bind off on that. So we're going to knit the first 2 stitches together with the 2 yarns held together, just like we've been doing. But then for our bind off, we're actually going to knit the next pair of stitches together with the 2 yarns held together as well. And then we can pass those stitches over just like we do for our normal bind off. So knit the 2 stitches together, pass the stitches over, and we're always working with the 2 strands of yarn here. So 2 together, pass it over. One thing to pay attention to here is we don't want to do it too tight because that might pull in the fabric. So you might want to make sure that you're holding the loops a little bit more loosely when you do your knit two together here. Just pulling up, oops, make sure I have both yarns. Just pulling up a little bit more yarn than you normally would to pull it through to make sure you're not binding off too tightly. Another option would be just to use a larger needle size for the bind off to make sure that it's not too tight. So I hope you enjoy learning how to work double knitting. We've created this swatch so that it starts you off with a just plain pattern with just one color on each side. Then we add a little bit of transitions in for these big boxes, and then we get a little bit more complex with the checkerboard. And then at the very end, we have this diagonal pattern where you're switching the transition points every 2 rows instead of every 4 rows. So you get a little bit more complex as you go. One thing to note with double knitting is that the space between the stitches on the needles takes up more yarn than when you just knit a plain stockinette piece. So the needle size that you're going to use for your project is probably going to be at least a size smaller than the size you would normally use for that weight of yarn. So for this swatch, I would normally knit this yarn on a 4 or maybe a 3.75 millimeter needle, and I actually used a 3.25 millimeter needle to get down to the size that I needed. Another thing to note about double knitting is that it takes quite a lot of yarn because you're making a double thick fabric. So you're using twice as much yarn for this dimension of square as you would if you were doing a plain stockinette square of the same size. So the yarn that you've been provided with for the swatching in your skill builder box is enough to make one swatch of this size, but probably not enough to make more than one. So if you're unsure of the needle size that you might want to use, you might want to just do a very small section of plain double knitting, especially as you're learning the technique and deciding how you want to hold the yarn in your hands, and play with different needle sizes on a smaller area. And then once you have an idea of what needle size is going to work for you and what techniques are going to work for you, then cast on for the whole swatch.